with this on. No, because you have a totally, there's a lot of differences between a live event and to be at home. Live event, you see, for example, the artist, and this helps you a lot to focus what the artist is doing, and this influences your hearing extremely. So if you would put a curtain, an acoustic transparent curtain between you and the artist and didn't change the sound, you will be surprised how bad sometimes the sound of live recording is. But this doesn't disturb you from really enjoying and have fun and also enjoy the sound. Also with classical recording, if there would be a curtain, you would not notice if the first and second violin would exchange, or if there's no chance for you. But with your eyes open, you will recognize, and your brain also will recognize. So if you would enter a classical concert and viola and violin would have been changed, your brain first wouldn't notice this. Then first you will think something is different, but it will take a time until you recognize that both positions have changed. When I started recording, I first thought I would like to pick up the sound as neutral as it is, but I was wrong. The thing is, I have to record the sound that when you hear at home, you have the feeling, and this is totally different. Yeah. If you are listening to a live event, you hear actual sources, and at home there are phantom sources, and phantom sources is for your brain totally different. So your brain has to do much more work, and you have to help with the recording and with equipment that your brain does recognize more easily the sound. So the thing is that if I would master totally with low distortion at all, this would sound boring. So you have to help with some tweaks that you really be able with this phantom source to follow, for example, the bass line. If you have some tape recordings, these tape recordings add a sonic texture which helps you to follow much more easier bass line. So when mastering, I always add a little bit of tape in the low frequency range in order that you at home have a feeling, oh, it sounds more neutral. But for your brain, it's a totally different work. The art form is totally different. Nothing has to do with each other. But at the end, what's important that you have the feeling, oh, I can enjoy the music and I like the music at home. But from the technical speaking, this has nothing to do with the sound of live playback or live performance. There are a lot of reasons for that. Maybe we should start with this CD transport first, because then it's relatively easy to follow. When I began with the CD transport, I thought if the output signal is the same, then the transport does sound the same. But then I realized when I compared different CD transport that they sound all different. Even the data is correct. So the next step was maybe the error correction was working differently. So I dived deeper into the decoder chip and built some error counter which count the C1 error and C2 error, and then I realized that not only the lower number of error correction is important, what's also important is to have an easy flow this error recovery. So if you have some areas where the error correction has to work very hard, and this is things that you hear. And so I made some measurement devices on these error correction chips and fed the CD transport, for example, with brown noise, or fed this with glass balls falling on this, and I could measure the impact on this servo board. So every time the servo board has to regulate the stream, you do hear this. So in the consequence, I mixed a different material of this sub-chassis internally, so to spread out all resonances. And also this sub-chassis is tuned to a frequency which is below the audio frequency but above the rotation frequency of the CD drive. And when looking at the servo board itself, you can also see that the current that you need to focus the length does influence the ground. So this is all push-pull in order to have a good regulation without disturbing the ground base. And this is vibrating related. So all vibration that a CD transport creates by itself by spinning the CD, or the sound pressure goes to the device, you can measure on these servo boards. And if the servo board has to correct, then you have a current flow which relates to the frequency that disturbs the unit. For example, this CD stabilizer, the noise you hear when you put this CD stabilizer on the CD, you will find also when listening to the music. And this is not something that is just an illusion. You can measure this.
And are you talking about microphonics? Is that what this is?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So this is vibrations turning into electrical signals. Right?
That's right. Yeah. The early CD drives, you can switch off the regulation. You can switch off the horizontal regulation. You can switch off the track regulation, and then you realize that you can measure if a car crosses the street. It's measurable, and with this tool, it's also easy to measure if I fire this with brown noise and see some peaks in resonances, that this at the end is audible. So this is the reason also why we have this spiral curve here, that we do not have any standing wave in this transport. The thing is that, for example, if you have a resonance at 400 Hertz, even every time when a signal from the loudspeaker does hit this device which contains this 400 Hertz, the regulation has to work very hard. So for this moment then, the voltage drops a bit, the current increases a bit, and this also then can go even to the mains outlets or input. So even when you have very good voltage regulator, the current that the servo device need to counter work this resonance will be there. Even if there's no voltage drop, the current will increase with this frequency, and so at the end this frequency is then audible. Even the digital 0 and 1s are nearly identical, or are identical for the measurement device. The resonance even finds, but this is very, very, even finds its way to the power cord. So when this originally CD drive and DA converter does have also glass fiber. So glass fiber has totally isolation of the common mode, but even with this glass fiber, I can hear difference if I have different layers of different materials, or I have only one material which resonates on the same frequency. This is a different story. For example, if I compare some bit true playback software. I originally thought that maybe the CPU usage is of importance, but then I also realized that the variation of CPU load does influence the sound. So similar as here, it's not the absolute number of error corrections. So if I have, for example, 20 corrections each second and compare another CD drive which goes to 18 corrections, but if this 18 correction has every some seconds peak, this will sound worse. And this is also the case then with CD. With playback software. So you can also compare this to network player because they are also bit true, but also all sound different. These are two stories that you have to take into account. One is that every product has to fulfill the specs concerning radio frequency, so that this doesn't radiate radio frequency, and also that radio frequency doesn't disturb the units. But these measurements fulfill also a good part that the disturbance gets not so sensitive. But these measurements are done mostly only with one unit and not with a complete hi-fi system. For example, if you have galvanically isolated inputs, as this DAC and also other DACs have, you think that on the measurement lab, oh, good, no common mode noise can enter the unit because every unit has a transformer. The same as network cable has transformers in at the connection side. But if you connect then a complete arrangement of hi-fi system, then you will see that still with this common mode rejection, you have some disturbance. So if you connect then and measure your completely connected system, then you will see things that you before only suggest or not suggest, erwarten oder expecting. Yeah. So the thing is that when I measure this with the audio precision, everything is fine. Then I hooked this up with a cheap squeeze box network player with a switch mode power supply, and suddenly I was able to measure. It was not audible for me as a ham, but I was able to measure some common mode noise of the switch mode power supply within the complete hi-fi system. So I bought then a linear power supply for the squeeze box, and everything went away, and also then the sound was improved. So, but when I measure the squeeze box with the switch mode power supply with the audio precision, which is also isolated, I do not measure any negative input. But
okay, so what you're saying is if you measure something in isolation, there is a risk you will not catch some of the problems because it needs to be measured whilst connected to a downstream DAC.
But this is also how we develop first. So when we develop the DA converter, we measure this and optimize this in isolation. But I do also measure this then in a complete system. That's important to do. For example, in some living rooms, you have also a TV system with a satellite or cable and TV and video storage. And if you connect this directly to your hi-fi system, the sound of your hi-fi system can collapse. So, and if you measure this as a complete system, you will also notice in your measurement that they disturb each other. But there are ways to prevent this disturbance. There are some signals that can disturb the clock. For example, if you have some common mode where the PLL has to work then differently, then this common mode noise or signal can then lead to FM modulation of the clock signal. So there are some methods or some ways where disturbance can find its way to this master clock and then also can be measured. Yeah. Right. But if you measure this isolated without a precision test gear or also with other test gears, you will not find this thing. So you have to also look to the real world. Yeah, with the Squeezebox touch I mentioned before, it was the power supply. So when I measured this at the audio precision, it measures fine. But in a real world connection with this switch mode power supply, I was able to measure this common mode noise, and the common mode noise also with a typical computer is 70-80 volt. And even with this galvanic isolation, it still finds some volt into the DA converter. But
then again, why does, like, if you put a very good power supply to feed the Squeezebox, it's still not going to sound as good as a transporter.
That's right. If you look then in detail on the how the digital signal looks like, you will notice that the digital audio transformer is not of a very high quality, and on the internet you find also some tweaks how to exchange this digital output. So there are still ways to improve the signal.
Right.
But for me, as sort of background listening with a linear power supply, it was good enough, but not with the other original switch mode.